Today, we have a very special guest, a spiritual entrepreneur with over 28 years of experience in Chinese medicine and internal arts. He was a former Karate Kid. He was part of the London Real Business Program and a guest on the London Real podcast. He's the founder of the Institute of Natural Medicine Ireland, Jade Natural Health Clinic, Chi Life Academy, and the host of the Cup of Chi podcast. He's on a mission to have a healer in every home. This is Slim and Light, and today we have Anthony Monteith. How you doing?
I see you're in Dubai.
In Dubai, yes. The sun is scorching somewhat.
Yeah.
It's actually nice weather now, yeah. It's not as hectic as it'll be in summer, you know?
Yeah. I'm the yin to your yang today because we're a bit overcast. But that's kind of, I've got used to that, nearly 30 years here now. But I do miss the sun.
But I'd like to start at the very beginning. So, would you mind just kind of give people, I don't know, maybe that introduction was a bit too long-winded. How would you describe yourself and what you do, and also maybe how you started with all this?
It's a really big journey, and like we could spend hours with it. But the short of it is, born in South Africa in Pretoria to English parents. They were living and working there in the 60s and 70s. And at about the age of 4, I had this incredibly powerful experience. I was lost in the woods, looking for firewood for a barbecue for my father. And, you know, what does a 4-year-old do? They go off and play. And had this amazing experience where I felt like nature was speaking to me. And it was an experience of kind of being an adult in a child's body. And I had this feeling that I was always going to work with energy, human energy. And then as a young chap, I had some, I suppose you would call them psychic experiences, speaking to loved ones who'd passed on, and then trying to sort of talk about that with my family, and the feeling of being, should I say, kind of not necessarily ridiculed, but kind of made to feel as if, you know, that was kind of a not a bad thing, but just kind of there, dear, that's nice. And then later on in my 20s, then I realized I actually had some gifts. I tried to become a physiotherapist. I thought about healing work. I'd been involved in the martial arts from the age of about 8. I started with judo, and then I was getting bullied because I had quite a strong South African accent as a kid, and so I stood out, and I used to wear very bright clothing. So when we moved from South Africa to England in the late 70s, I was a perfect target for bullies. And so I was always what I call self-starter. So I said to my parents, I want to learn how to defend myself. I chose judo, which was okay. I didn't really enjoy the class. I didn't really get it. And then I saw a martial art called Tang Sudo, which is Chuck Norris's martial art. And that is a Korean karate. It's made in the 1940s. It's their approximation, I suppose, to karate. And it merges Chinese, Korean, and Japanese concepts. And it would be the mother or the brother, I'd say probably the brother of Taekwondo. So they come from the same martial school, Muda Kwan, which is the school of martial virtue, and then it was split. And Master Wang Ki, he was like the head of, it was called Tang Sudo Subakdo. I happen to have an incredible teacher, he's still going, Master Robert Hedges. And I trained in that till my mid-20s, and I got a bad injury. I thought about joining the RAF, actually. Wanted to go and fly fast jets for the RAF when I was a young chap, but my eyesight's rubbish. So I was told you'll only ever work on radar or maybe possibly logistics. And I said, no, I want to fly. And so that was my dream shattered, but my love was human health. I loved biology, anatomy. So it made sense to follow that route. And with the martial arts, health and healing, it kind of came together. I wasn't accepted into physiotherapy school, but I'm blessed that I didn't go down that route, because it led me naturally, with my interest in Oriental things, to go into Chinese medicine. Badly injured in my 20s, ACL on the left, a cruciate ligament, complete rupture. And when I moved here to live and work, I was fortunate enough to have a really good surgeon called Mr. Herson, who was, I believe, Roy Keane's surgeon for Roy Keane's knee surgery. So this guy really knew what he was at. And he said, oh, within 9 months, you'll be back, training. But little did I know, my recovery was pretty shocking. And through a friend in London, said, go and get acupuncture and something called Tui Na, which is the Chinese physical therapy. And within 4 or 5 months, I was back running. I used to live in Dublin, so I'd run along the canal and train. And I went back to the martial arts for another 5 or 6 years till in my early 30s. And then I realized I needed to not come into the clinic with black eyes and broken wrists. It doesn't look a very good look as a therapist. It's like Fight Club, coming into work every morning with a black eye. So I gave up the martial arts and focused in I'm now 52, so the last 20 years more focused in on the health and healing aspect. My personal practice now here in Dublin for the last 8 years in this location in Blanche is predominantly pain, so back, neck, shoulders, injuries. But as you know, I've worked with athletes. I've also worked with fertility cases. And my journey to Chinese medicine was very mixed. It was an apprenticeship. So I never went down the traditional college route. I found someone, got them to teach me, moved on, found somebody else, got them to teach me. And then eventually, as time went on, I realized I had to get official accreditation, because otherwise you don't get insured and you can't practice. So it's been a journey. The last 4 or 5 years since the madness we've been through, I've been training in what we call internal arts. So aligned myself with a couple of masters, Master Yap Bo Hyung, who's in Malaysia, and he's the living legend of Wu Mei, Wu Zhu Tuan, and Yan Shou Gong. They're all very fancy Chinese words, but it's ancient martial arts styles that would have been taught in the Shaolin Temple, predominantly to the more senior practitioners. So it's very different from the MMA style of combat, where you learn a lot of power, grappling, choking, punching, striking. It's a very much more efficient style, not very pretty to look at, but very effective. And so I've been learning those things for myself, for my own well-being. And then more recently, sort of teaching again, going back to teaching post COVID. So I've been traveling to West Cork to teach. When you were filming me those 7 or 8, 10 years ago, I was teaching then in a clinic we used to have 10 minutes away. So I'd taken a break. I've probably done, we averaged it out. If we were to take 1,200 to 1,300 treatments a year for the last 20 years, so multiply that, that's the average amount of treatments I've done. So it's a lot of one-on-one sessions with people over the years. And so with that said, where am I going now? I think I'm going back into teaching, training. I'm going to run seminars on Qigong, which is another self-healing tool. It's like a combination of meditation, breath work, movement, self-awareness. I think we're at the spearhead of this now. I'm noticing famous people, Mel Gibson, Harry Styles, these people using Qigong as a tool for their own health. So it's like very exciting. It's like it must have been what it was like when yoga first came to the West. It's only now starting to really grow, and you will see it coming. If you go and look at it, there's a famous trainer called Paul Chek, Chek. He has a big podcast, a big following. He's a small, tiny little guy, was a paratrooper, he's absolutely jacked. But he does Qigong. His go-to is Qigong. Another famous personal trainer is Steve Maxwell, he was on London Real. He's in his 70s and he does Qigong. So there's something brewing, it's coming. We're kind of just at the very start of it all. But there's a lot more to my story than that. But yeah, so this awakening that I had at a very young age, and I think I used the martial arts to channel my skills, and then wanting to heal. It's just something I feel within me, and it's probably because I need to heal myself. So I go around healing other people to try and heal myself.
That's incredible.
Thought of a style, you maybe have heard of it, called Wing Chun.
Wing Chun, yeah.
Wing Chun. Is this something that you thought about doing yourself?
I had, and that's because I used to have a poster of Bruce Lee in my bedroom, and I think my parents thought I was possibly gay because I had this huge picture of a half-naked Bruce Lee doing this, and then I quickly realised I swapped it for Joan Jett or some... yeah, something like that. Or what was the one that Pamela Anderson did? Barbed Wire or something like that. But yeah, it was just, there was a fascination with Bruce Lee. Anyway, I mean, looking back on it, you know, he's a showman. I don't think he was all that everybody claims that he was, but that idea of Wing Chun excited me. And what's really more exciting is the guy that I've recently met, Master Yap. He teaches a style called Wu Mei, and it is the mother of Wing Chun. So Wu Mei is the monk, if you like, the female monk. I think in Cantonese it's pronounced Nyuk Moi, and so she was the monk that developed Wing Chun. And the story goes is that she wronged either an emperor or the imperial court, but she was loved within the imperial court at her time. And so instead of killing her, they chopped off her arm. So they took her arm as payment. I don't know if she was sleeping with one of the imperial guards or she was doing something she shouldn't have been doing.
So she was a one-armed bandit. Yeah,
she was a one-armed bandit, and she left, and she was originally a Taoist, I believe, like a Taoist monk. So she would have been more northern Wudang area. But she moved, I think, and brought her style to the Buddhist Shaolin temple. Shaolin just means small forest. It's nothing special, it just means tiny forest. But she was observing the monks fighting and sparring, because you had fighting monks, spiritual monks, medicine monks, educating monks. So the Shaolin temple was really a huge university. Not the thing that you see on TV now with the monks in orange robes. That's just something that's completely been remanufactured for tourism. But she challenged the monks in a polite manner and was able to defeat them easily, because having one arm, being probably smaller stature, she had to learn to use internal power. So she developed a way of using, we believe she was using the fascia, which is the connective tissue of the body that the muscles are held within. And any of you who train in Tom Meyer's work or any fascial maneuvers, or the Human Garage is a big one now on YouTube, fascial maneuvers, fascial release. It's a type of tissue that has its own autonomic nervous system. So we believe that possibly she was tapping into that with her mind and able to deliver incredibly powerful blows. And it's kind of like a sneaky martial art. And then it got adopted, I believe, by southern China. There was smaller stature to the northern Chinese. Generally, northern Chinese being taller, mountain people. Southern Chinese that were more of farmers and fishermen. So it's a very effective style for smaller people. You could overcome bigger opponents very effectively. So yeah, I had looked at Wing Chun. I had friends who did it, but part of my ego liked to fly through the air and break breeze blocks and do spinning back kicks and foot sweeps. You know, so that, and I was good at it. But the problem for me is my build was okay for the style, but my constitution from a joint physiology wasn't great, so I was prone to a lot of injuries, so it kind of shortened my career.
Yeah, and like you said, that people, when you went to do physiotherapy, of course, it was kind of counterproductive to walk in as a physiotherapist and show like a lot of wounds and etc.
Yeah.
You said Shaolin means woods?
Tiny wood, tiny forest.
I think...
Shao, small, lin, forest, wood, small wood.
I think most people think it means something regarding martial arts. So that blew my mind because, that is amazing that you got that. This is the first time in my life I've heard this. I thought it meant breaking braids, giant monster strength.
No.
So, no, it means
The Chinese language is actually it's complicated to learn, but its simplicity and its construction of words.
Right.
Like for in English, as you know, learning English, we could say in my clinic here you have a massage table, massage bench, treatment table, treatment bench, physiotherapy couch, treatment couch. It's all one thing with 10 words. In China, it's generally that one word means that thing.
Oh, amazing.
So Shaolin just means Shao, small, Lin, wood or forest. So
thank you. Good.
Obviously, I know you, Anthony, from working with you in the past. Create a series of videos in your clinic showing off the different methods it's great to hear that you're going back into kind of teaching, obviously you have a lot of experience, a lot. I think people would benefit from their time with you, but I remember filming those classes back in the day, and I called them classes, but obviously it was in a clinic setting. It wasn't like sitting down and stuff. It was very interactive, and for me it was very interesting. I loved video projects where I felt like I would have done this for free. I'm actually getting, I'm learning stuff, just because it's interesting to learn from different places. And it was fascinating that from cupping to understanding the body as like one holistic thing. Someone might say they have a pain in their neck, but where's that pain actually coming from? Understanding the mapping of the foot and how you can see different organs, all this stuff I learned from filming your classes and working with you. And it was all very interesting. I do one thing in particular I remember, and obviously the acupuncture as well. There was a lot of interesting things. Please reword this if I've remembered it wrong. But it's something that stuck with me. You mentioned when you're massaging and someone has, maybe they're letting you know that they have a lot of pain or there's a lot of negativity on their mind. It's like a lot of energy they want to release. You as the, I don't know what you say, practitioner or healer, you have to be careful that you're not absorbing that. And you mentioned that like a lot of times staring out the window, maybe towards a tree or as something solid that can like focal point that energy and kind of take it down the roots, like a recycling of energy, let's say. I don't know if you said it exactly like that, but I found it fascinating. And in my own life, I try to be careful that, it's great to help people, but you also have to make sure that you're doing it from a safe place. Similar enough to like, let's say a counselor, might, I know they're not exactly the same, but I'm just curious if you could touch on that a bit and if that was right.
So it's obviously kind of strange for me in the beginning because not being able to do physiotherapy, I moved into health science. So I went to university and I studied Western health science. And I thought that would maybe get me into physio. But obviously life had other plans for me. And during my training, we used to talk about grounding, rooting, earthing. As you know, earthing is now suddenly a big thing, walking in your bare feet. And, there's culturally, we can talk about that too. There are certain cultures, I'm sure, Lebanese, I'm sure in your own culture, Obi's culture, there are these ideas of negative forces, negative energy. We've all been there where we go into a meeting and there's an atmosphere, somebody's dropped a bombshell in the meeting and you can feel it, you can sense it's not good. And I think, we're an organic being with each individual cell is producing electricity, bioelectricity. And I think like anything, it's like walking into a building and one corner of the building's damp and cold and miserable. but the other side over there is nice and warm and light. And I think that what I found was, I wasn't sure if this was a real thing, but as time went on, I realized I was getting sick. I was getting sick from treating sick people. Now, it wasn't like a cold or a flu, but I just didn't feel right. And I remember my wife saying to me, "You look grey, you look pasty, you look like somebody's pulled the battery on you. Maybe you need to ground yourself." And this is my wife, who's really not into this stuff at all, but even she could see it. And I decided to go back and re-examine the way I was working and maybe look at grounding, earthing, and centering myself. And there's two aspects to that. Yes, when you're treating someone, there is a possibility you could absorb their negativity, their negative emotions that they're carrying, that they're holding on to, that are lying dormant and stagnant in their body. So, from an esoteric, spiritual perspective, by using these tools like holding the person, pointing to a tree, redirecting that energy with your mind to a tree to be recycled, there's two aspects to that. Even if you don't believe that that's the case, psychologically, you're setting up a boundary. Yeah, so it's a tool. You're speaking to your subconscious mind and saying, I know this person's not well. I don't want to take on their vicarious trauma that they're bringing in because perhaps they were abused by a family member, or in some cases I treated soldiers that were in horrendous fighting zones and they took on PTSD. And when you're caring, when you have an empathy, when you're hypersensitive to people's energy, you have to protect yourself. Now, recently in my Chi Life Academy, I posted to my students that it's actually quite hard to treat people when you're putting a firewall around yourself. And that's what a lot of spiritual traditions do. You know, they pull in the light of the Tao, the way, God, whatever you want to call it, and protect yourself. You know, call in your archangels. I have nothing against that. That's just a belief system. Whatever works, but it's actually really hard to have a firewall around yourself all the time, because yes, you're protected, but you're using your own energy to protect yourself all the time. So I have this idea of grounding and rooting, and we might, if we get a chance for this podcast, is demonstrated with Obi what grounding and rooting feels like physically, because you need to be able to feel it physically before you can move the energy. So I do think, can you get sick from other people? Yes, I think so. Can you get energetically sick from them? Yes, I think so. And I know this because I've experienced it. I've seen it with other practitioners. And there was a point where I got so burnt out and I went to China for treatment because I was losing weight randomly. I was getting constant daily headaches. And I knew then there was some part of me, my nervous system was shattered. I was working, treating 20 people a day, one-on-one, and then trying to write a book, and then teach students at the same time. I was doing double jobbing. And then I had a son that just come into the world, you know, so being a dad, being a business owner, doing all these things, you know, there's a limit. And at that time, I was probably in my mid-30s. I was a lot thinner now than I am. I was a lot fitter, but internally, I had no power. I had no real internal force, because I was give. And when you do that, you just drain yourself. I'm sure, you know, when you guys are doing podcasts or hosting parties or doing events, you're like, stay away from that person. They're like an emotional vampire. And you can feel it, right? You can feel it in the conversation. I mean, you know, people that are outgoing, vibrant, you know, chatty, talkative, they share. You have the oversharers, you know, and you're like, I didn't really need to know that. And then you have the people that are like, you need a crowbar to get anything out of them. How are you?
True.
Yeah. How are you too? Yeah. How was the match you went to? Nah, it was alright. And you're like, for God's sake, really? You know, I have to put up with this? You know, so even if you don't believe in energy and movement, like, come on, you know, we sit on a planet that does something crazy like 52 million miles it travels in like a year or something mental. and it's spinning at thousands of miles an hour whilst being towed through a galaxy by the sun, and you're saying there's no such thing as energy. You know in Dubai you can get burnt to hell by this bright ball in the sky. That's not energy. Energy's everywhere. We're a wave function. We're not really cells. We're construction of energy that's organized. So are we really human, or are we just the construction of energy? So I think the ancients understood this. They didn't have electron microscopes. They didn't have MRI machines, but they knew there was something beyond just flesh. And in some cultures, we have evil spirits, good spirits, being possessed by demons. We have exorcists in the Catholic Church, that take out evil entities. I'd like to say I'm not sure if it's true, but I've definitely had people come in and I've gone, whoa, this person needs, some divine intervention. And you can see it in their behavior and their attitude. And to do that, you need to training. It's hard work beats talent. If you can fly, if you have talent, you're a natural healer, great. But if you're not working on yourself, forget it. You're not going to last very long. I used to liken my work. I used to look at two racing car drivers when I was a kid. I used to love Formula One, and it was Ayrton Senna, Schumacher, and Nigel Mansell. But it was Nigel Mansell that was at that track at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. going round and round and round, because he was a good driver, but he wasn't talented like Ayrton Senna, and he wasn't talented like Schumacher. And unfortunately, Schumacher's gone, Senna's gone, but Nigel Mansell, is still going, because hard work for him, it's just like, keep going. And so I say to my students, you can have talent, but you need to work at it. You need to work at conserving your energy, being more efficient, protecting yourself, And some of the traditions carry that. If you're working on someone, protect yourself, use these tools, redirect energy, recycle it. The earth likes to recycle shit. You put shit in the ground and you grow good things. So take their shit, ground it. Don't try to go, you cannot harm me, my wings are like a shield. This is, what people are taught, It's the Gandalf, you shall not pass, but it's temporary.
Yeah.
It's temporary.
No one is a lonely island. What's the saying? What's the saying? No one is an island. No one is a...
No, yeah, exactly. No man is an island. So, and to have a spiritual mentor, I make sure I have someone that I can reach out to that has several years ahead of me and has been through this. Do I believe in God? I believe in something. I believe in humanity. I believe the crazy times we're going through, it's kind of an exciting game that's being played. And I think we need to, as much as possible in the tradition I train in, is maintain the center line. Don't reject the left, don't reject the right, but try to bring everything, there's always people vying for power, maintain that center line. What is the truth? The truth is probably a little bit of that's true and a little bit of this is true, but not one way or the other. That yin-yang balance.
And I think you are right indeed that at times I do have to say no and redirect that energy, because it is difficult for me to say no. Let me find my balance, my inner peace, my feng shui.
Your feng shui. Feng is wind, shui is water. So it's the idea of, if you're building a house, make sure it's not on a too windy place, and make sure you're not building it on a bog like we tend to do in Ireland. We tend to put new houses in the middle of a field that's not been properly surveyed.
But Anthony, when people often talk about feng shui, or my introduction to feng shui was the movement of a room. So you walk into the room and the way the couch is and the way you've put the painting, it's like, oh, this room has feng shui. So they mean you've placed things in a way where energy can flow. Is that? the correct.
I mean, you're going to see a lot of it in Dubai. It's like you're going to go into a certain hotel or a bank and you'll go, this feels really awesome. You go into another one, you go, yeah, they got this badly wrong. Like, you know, and Hong Kong is a real feng shui capital. If you want to, and Singapore even more so. They understood, like, if you want to have an excellent building and you want to showcase your bank or your corporation, they'd employ a feng shui master. A feng shui master who come in and say, the building needs to be like this, it needs to be facing this direction, and internally the rooms need to be constructed this way. And I would say, more so than ever, generally, the Asian culture, East Asia, so not just China, but East Asia would follow that premise, because it just gives you that, if you're 1% better every day over a year, you know, it's the same with your building. When you're building it, it's a little bit better, it's constructed a little better, the position of the building. And you can also, rightly or wrongly, use feng shui to cut down your rivals. You know, there's a famous building, you can look it up and Google it, I think it's a bank in Hong Kong, and they have this cross lattice shape on the outside. And anything like that that's made of metal is like a sword. So all the buildings around it are literally being energetically cut. So it's like this yin yang, you know, you can be Darth Vader or you can be Obi-Wan, you know, with your feng shui. But he's Obi-Wan, I'm Kenobi. But it's this idea of... I'm
Sorry,
sure you
probably need a bit of both, right? Like, does everyone need to at least be aware that they have both and know how to kind of master both, and then maybe know when to utilize?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you did kickboxing, right? There'd be moments when you had to tap into your warrior. We call it dark, you know. I think we put labels on things, you know, that, you know, dark is bad, but I mean, the stars are supported within the void, you know. It's like, as long as you know how to use that when you need it and you don't let it control you. And I think as a kid, I remember I knew I was going down some kind of energy route. The first film I ever saw, the first movie I ever saw in the cinema was in 1977, and it was Star Wars. It was the original kind of one, and there was no seats in the auditorium. We were right at the front. So as a little 5-year-old, I had to look up at the screen. And of course, if you know the film, the first scene is Darth Vader coming into the trade ship and you know, grabbing hold of the guards and killing them, and then interrogating Princess Leia. So, you know, my first entry into sci-fi was an evil dude with black energy, and I knew, like, you know, you're always going to root for the light. So my teacher used to say, with dark powers, you can be extremely powerful and achieve quite a lot, as say with voodoo or with people that worship, I suppose, demonic entities, and you can achieve a lot of influence, but it consumes you. So it will ultimately consume you. If you are on the light side, you may not be as powerful, but karmically, energetically, you're always protected. So, you know, you'll always be eventually recycled into a better way of living. And when you pass on, your consciousness is more clear. So, I mean, have I done bad things in the past? Yeah. Have I been in nasty fights and done things to other people? Of course. Like, no one's perfect. And we will pay the price for that at some point, I believe. But, you know, I didn't willingly go out to... You know, like the things we're seeing where people go out and they're, you know, mentally dysfunctional and they're just attacking people randomly. And I mean, why do we go to war? I mean, I would say you can't have peace without war. Like, the concept of peace cannot exist without understanding what war was. And the same with war. You know, people in war are looking forward to peace. Nobody wants to continue war. We're in an age called Pisces, which is the two fish swimming. That's the yin and the yang. We're slowly transgressing now into the age of Aquarius. And Aquarius is the air, it's information. So now what's happening is we're moving into the age of AI, information. Faster information, more information. Eventually, you'll never need to read, because the information will be instantly beamed into your brain. But we need to be more human. So the more we're going artificial, we need to maintain more of that humanity, because it will be more unique and more different. You know, it's like, I'm sure when you talk to your dad, he'll reminisce about how the first mobile phones were like, you know, you carry them in a suitcase, and he used to think this was great. You know, I remember my uncle had the Vodafone. Yeah, strap. Yeah, it's a battery, basically a battery with a phone with a coil on it, and we used to think, you know, and anyone who had one, we used to go, okay, wow, what a wanker, like, he's a big phone.
I heard you had them in the car and stuff, you know?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the police in the UK and other than the UK had them, you know, and they literally have a dial-it, you know.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it was all, you know, so we're progressing, and the danger is we lose our humanity in that progression, and perhaps we create a new version of ourselves that we believe is better. But in that regard, I think we lose our spirituality, we lose that soul aspect. It becomes better in every single way, but just no soul. It becomes soulless. It becomes the Darth Vader. It becomes, you know, extremely powerful, and it from a materialistic construct, but not necessarily from a spiritual construct. So I do think that if we get it right, there's 80% chance of a lot of the mundane tasks will be easier on us. And we can focus on being more creative, doing more podcasts, doing more art, doing more visual, doing more dance, doing more parties, and expressing ourselves as a human. So hopefully we use AI to take away the mundane and give us a chance to actually do the stuff we're supposed to do, which is create and be creative. You know, that's what I'm hoping. That's my idealistic mind.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we should or could achieve that at least for a while, I'd like to think. But I'd like to touch point I mean, until full-on Terminator happens. I'm joking. But
it's only 4 years away.
But there will be a nice marriage of human and robots and AI, I think, for a good few decades. No, I'm joking. I am positive about things, but I want to go back a bit, because you were talking when we were talking about energetically grounding yourself, but you had also mentioned physical, like literal grounding that has become popular. And I'm just curious, you know, you see a lot of people getting these grounding mats because they say it like literally boosts their immune system. They feel like they can sleep at night. I don't necessarily want to talk about that, but just that's kind of like a hack. Now, maybe you have to buy that, but do you have kind of simple things for people that do feel a bit too detached from their body, from their spiritual essence? Do you have like a few quick like daily tips without needing to buy something that you think can kind of bring people back to nature, back to themselves? You know, we're all on our phones, we're all on the, you know, is there a way, what would be the first thing that you'd recommend?
To kind of backtrack a little bit to answer that in a 3-stage. First stage is there's a misunderstanding about grounding, earthing, and rooting. So it's all this is a language construct. It depends on your culture. If you're American English, or Irish English, or whatever English, but it's this idea that what is grounding and what is earthing, right? So a lot of time we buy a grounding mat, or we buy grounding shoes, or we buy a grounding mat that goes underneath our bed so we can sleep when the wire goes out, and so I think we need to be clear about, as a culture, as a human being. I mean, as a kid, I used to run to school barefoot. Like, there was no shoes, you ran to school barefoot. So your first experience of going to school was being earthed. I call it earthing. Touching your feet on the ground, being in contact with earth. Now, be aware, the earth spins and it has metal at its core. So it's a magnet. So you don't want to be too earthed. And I'm sure Obi can recognize this from his experiences, that in some cultures, the first few years of life, the child is strapped to the mother because the earth can absorb too much energy from the child. And we want the child to be creative and be mental and spiritual while it's growing up. And also in some cultures, you don't want your kid running off and getting bitten by a snake. So it's a lot easier to be closer to your mother. So earthing, I think, is kind of what I call an ionization process. So it's like literally the cells of the body are being realigned because the earth is a magnet. Yeah. And I think that helps a lot of people's health. Grounding is a different thing. Grounding is bringing your mind literally physically down into your body physically, feeling yourself and your feet in the ground. So if I was to say for anyone, the practice would be when you feel yourself anxious, when you feel like you've got a big important meeting, or you feel overwhelmed, is to stand your feet parallel as if they're on train tracks. Try to see, can you feel the weight of your feet on this floor? It doesn't have to be first floor, second floor, ground floor. Can you feel the weight of your feet evenly? Can you draw your attention to your feet and to your legs? And obviously, if you're born with no legs, can you attention to your waist? Can you feel your sits bones, your seat bones in the chair? Can you draw your awareness there? And that will immediately ground you. And you can do it on an aeroplane, right? You can be flying 50,000 feet in the sky at 450 miles an hour. You can still be grounded. And if you can physically ground yourself, your mind will follow, right? Yi Dao, Qi Dao means where your mind goes, the mind way, the energy will follow. So Yi is mind, Yi way, Qi Dao, energy follows the same way. So practically it's, can you feel your feet? Are you in your feet? And I remember as a kid, as my kids were growing up, we had a Wii. Nintendo Wii, and you had like a balance board, and it would tell you, are you balanced? And you'd be like, shit, I'm actually 70% more in my right leg. And it was, again, that very clever way of bringing yourself back into your center. So, I mean, look, we walk around with these insulators on our feet, and that stops you from earthing, but it doesn't stop you from grounding. And I'm hoping that, perhaps at the end of this podcast, I can demonstrate that it's a transferable skill that can be taught. I was in a corporate company recently, a big airline, and I was teaching the sales staff how to ground themselves physically. And going into a meeting grounded, you're more in it. You're more on yourself. You're not being drawn into the drama. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I actually do, because just there a few minutes back when you were explaining to like feel your feet, can you feel your feet weighing down? I felt this wave over me that I can only describe as feeling so much more focused and present with you, as opposed to kind of anywhere back here in my thoughts. I don't know if that's because I've done a lot of meditation over the years that I can get to that place quicker once you mention it. But I think it's an incredible tip for anyone, for anything you have in life. We're always so trapped here, and we have a whole body. That one tip getting me into my feet, I just feel like, oh, I'm really, and it's respectful as well, because then I'm really locked into the conversation with you, as opposed to in whatever 20 conversations in my head,
Sure. I mean, look at what we're noticing. There's more and more diagnosis of various neurodivergency. But that's because we've become so well developed in our mind and our brain that the mind and the brain is adapting to the fast pace. Like, I look at my son, and you cannot beat him at Snap. The card game Snap? His reflexes are sonic. It's impossible. And I said to him, how have you done it? He said, from years of gaming. Gaming. He's developed that mental speed. Now, give him a task to do. Like yesterday, we went out and we were digging a ditch. He can't do it. It's like, So it's because he's thinking, I need to text my girlfriend, then I need to go and update my Roblox account, and then I need to go and finish level 309 on Far Cry, or whatever it is he's doing. It's so like, that's where he's at, so he can't maintain that physicality. So wherever possible, and I've talked about this, and I know it's not always easy, is to find yourself in nature. Even if it's 5 minutes walking the dog. For you, like in Dubai, is, find that place where you can dip your feet in the sand, or you can walk in the sea. And I know there's a lot of artificial constructs within, but I'm sure going to the desert is extremely grounding.
There's a stillness.
There's a stillness there. Being near a tree, literally, there's a whole discipline of Qigong where they go to a tree and ask the tree for help and send any negativity up through the body, out through the head, out through the mental space to the tree. The tree is like a lightning rod and takes that energy down and recycles it for you. There's a whole tradition on that. You know, tree huggers, right? The hippies, they were hugging trees. They didn't know why. Oh, you know, save the trees. They didn't understand what they were doing, but in some sense, they were earthing and grounding themselves at the same time.
I mean, recent studies have revealed that trees actually can talk to each other. The people also understand now that there is actually some kind of connection between those tree huggers and the trees that are receiving, you know, energy, or, you know, so it is actually, there is actually some proof behind it for those naysayers that say that type of energy doesn't exist. Right?
In the Japanese culture, they have forest bathing.
Yes.
Right, you know this. So to de-stress, you walk through the forest. I'm lucky where I live. I live on the border with Kilkenny, and there's a forest park that I can go 3 or 4 times a week. I'm just walking through that forest. So we forget as well, some trees are 300-400. I think I went down to Bear and counted off, and there's a tree that's 900 years old. Like, and they charted all the things that tree has been through in our history. Does the tree care? No. You know, tree's like, I'm just living. And like, you know, I think a lot of the Qigong, so there's Qigong, Neigong, Daoyin, Neidan, they're all variations on internal cultivation. I think a tree is ultimately internally cultivating. It's growing its roots, it's becoming more rooted, more grounded, whilst expanding and becoming larger and gathering more energy and more wisdom. And I think that's possibly through people meditating and observing nature and saying, I wonder what it would like to be like a tree for a day, and observe how a tree stands still and doesn't move, and yet bends with the breeze and that is grounded. I wonder what it's like to be like a crane and flow and fly and feel the air and move my energy, move my chi. What it's like to be a snake and to let my energy out like a snake. You know, so I think we were far more connected. And I think if people want to de-stress, they need to become more connected. You know, it's hard if you're in an apartment block in the middle of London, you know, but you know, a flower box with some flowers. I had a friend who was trapped in Korea during COVID, and he was 47 days in a hotel room, and the one thing that kept him going was they gave him a little box to plant some seeds and grow these, and it's like that connection while he was waiting to be sent back to the UK.
It definitely at first seems like a very impressive country or city, but overall the country, but Dubai specifically as the city is very impressive. And then the more time you spend here, the more you're like, oh, it's shallow, it's just all about money. But then you spend even longer time here and you realize, oh, there's all different types of versions of Dubai. There's like everything. It's like almost like America. It's got like extremes of everything. You can
How long have you been
now? I came here June 21, so it'll be 4 years in
wow.
It
feels like longer than that.
Remember, you're Jamie Antonio Sajon. You're Jamie Antonio Sajon.
Yeah.
I never know what he means by that, but it does give me a lot of confidence when he says that. I'm like, right, that is my name.
I do have to say, you're one of the only people that you can spend time with and always feel relaxed. I never felt like we had to like do anything impressive, or you were very open. I remember I brought you down to my mother-in-law after the Waterford smackdown, and we drank nice red wine and we just collapsed because we were exhausted from all day filming, and things never kind of go according to plan, but it was good, you know. So yeah, I have to say that's one thing I did enjoy, and you were very professional in your filming. You were very non-intrusive, which I think is actually quite hard to do.
Yes, especially when basically I'm very intrusive. Hey, how you doing? Let me look over your shoulder.
Yeah,
what is this?
He's a big character, but I can see why you like hanging out with him.
Any building where I live by myself or by people that remind me of my childhood, I turn into an ultra hermit.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So I'm 50% extrovert, 50% introvert, and luckily you're seeing my.
Have you ever done the human design? The human design. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
So, I mean, after the podcast later on, you give me your details and I'll do it for you and do a chart for you. Sure. Some people say it's dangerous, like it's a little bit misdirected, and other people like it, some don't. But it's really, what it does is it looks at what it's called your aura type. So how you project yourself in the world that you live in. And I think it's based on ancient Kabbalah, astrology, I Ching, which is the book of changes, the ancient book written by Lao Tzu. It's like combines all of these aspects, and then it looks at how you can move through the world and how you can make decisions. And most of the time, I think it's fairly accurate. Like I look at my son, and he's what we call a manifester, pure manifester. And these people are like really struggle in life. They struggle to socialize. They struggle to be around people. But if you want stuff to be done, that's the person you want. He's just going to make it happen instantly. I'm a manifesting generator, which is a hybrid. So I have that ability to manifest things into the world, but also a generator is someone who can work really hard. So think of your generators as like builders, plumbers, electricians, people that just keep the world turning. And then I have a mate who runs a clinic in Kildare. He's a projector. His energy is accumulate as much knowledge. I mean, the guy is like a garbage truck of information. He can just like consume massive volumes, and then occasionally he goes woof like a lighthouse, and he just projects and says, if you want to be well, if you want to do better, you need to do these things. Ba 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 ba. But the problem with a projector is they need to recharge. So he has to work smart. He has to then sometimes lie down, rest, go away on holiday, and then come back and work again. So then there's all these other designs that I can't remember them all. But it's really, really interesting. It'd be interesting to do your chart because you could find, you're a mixture. There's actually now, I think, people out there that can predict where your ideal place to live is if you want to really harmonize your energy. Apparently New York. Now, I've been to New York. I don't like it. Japan. There you go.
I've never been. I'm going to this year. And I think it would be, but we'll see. We'll see.
Apparently it's New York for me, but I went there and I was not impressed. So there you go. Sorry, New York. It just wasn't my bag.
I've always thought my place was Vancouver, Canada. Yet I've never been, and then it happened, and I came here. But I'm still wondering if that is the city that suits me. Just who I am.
I'd say go to it and see, but go to the island, go to Vancouver Island. One of my good friends lives on the island, and I fell in love with New Zealand. I love New Zealand. I love China. I love being in China. But when I went to Canada, it was next level. It was like I've come home. Yeah, it's just the new world, and so they have that new attitude to life, but also then you have the wildness of. Almost like there's parts of Canada still unexplored, it feels.
Yes.
Yeah. The weather can be terrible.
Well, I've heard Vancouver is a little bit better than Ireland in the summers and a little bit colder than Ireland in the summers. So for Irish people, it suits. But there's other parts of Canada where it's like -15, -30.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, that's too much. That's not.
Yeah, interior is like -40 or something. Yeah, forget it. Not including wind chill factor, so maybe -50.5.
If I had guessed, I would have said, Jamie, that your ideal place is probably San Francisco.
San Francisco. That would be, that seems like a really cool hippie place too. See, the thing is, why Vancouver sounds accurate for me is because it has this nice mixture of the actual, I don't want to say capitalism, but entrepreneurialism of like, create something of yourself. It has all that, but then opposite beside it is like the nature and the sea and the forests and but they have them integrated really well. And it's like that that kind of fits both sides of what I.
You're right. You're right. I forgot about the entrepreneurial kind of mindset that in San Francisco kind of probably has eroded over time. So I'm actually wrong then. You're right. You do kind of bloom in an entrepreneurial kind of environment. Hence, you keep staying in Dubai. Yeah, it's too much of it. Yeah, you're right. But yeah, so San Francisco would probably be out of the question. But I was in Canada myself, and yeah, there's certain parts there where there's like you go through it and you're like thinking, that would be such a great opportunity here. You can see, you can like envision it because it's not there, but you can see that they would adopt it. But my mindset, I'm like, I wished I need this person and that person. And for example, Jamie and I, who knows, maybe in 10 years, we both will go to Canada and create.
Well, if you wanted to do some work in Canada, I have a good friend on the island, and we did 2 big retreats over there called the Wellness Summit, and we camped out. So there's another thing for grounding, earthing is it's like camping in nature, being like you sleep amazingly well when there's no blue light, there's no artificial orange light. Okay, you've the wind and the rain and things like that, but after a few days, your body completely acclimatizes to waking up when the sun hits your tent and wanting to go to sleep when the sun is down. And we were talking about that this is the world we live in. We create these artificial environments in which we live in. And I do think that plays a lot on people's anxiety and their energy, the circadian rhythm, the natural balance. Anyone that does Qigong with me always says they report they sleep better, as long as not training at 1 a.m. But I think I know we need to progress. I know we want that. Possibly we are going to become intergalactic or interplanetary species. It's going to happen. It's just like we put it in all the sci-fi films. It's like we're manifesting by creating those films. It's like a manifestation journal. It's like, I want to be a millionaire by the end of the year. And what we're doing is we're saying, well, eventually we're going to get off this planet and, go and propagate Mars or whatever. But it's the same. We still have to maintain that humanity. We still have to look after our health. Those 2 astronauts trapped up in space right now, circumnavigating the planet, when Elon gets up there and brings them down, their bodies are going to be destroyed. They're not going to be able to stand up properly. They'll have lost at least 30-40% bone density. So it's not easy living in that environment. And I think we're not there yet. We're a teacher mindset. It'd be very hard to get to Mars in our current state because our heart relies on gravitational force to beat properly. That's why we can probably go around the planet. We can probably spend a certain amount of time on the moon. But beyond that, we need artificial help physically because our heart pushes blood up, but gravitational forces help also our blood. That's why we have iron in our blood. It matches the core of the earth. If you look at some of the ancient, like this stuff is Ayurvedic, it's Indian, it's the chakra system. If you look at some of the old textbooks, you look at the beings that they draw, like Shiva and Krishna, they're blue. They embody them blue or green. Yes, and this is this idea that perhaps their blood, the metallic components of their blood were different to us, which is, we're iron-based. We're iron individuals. We're in the Iron Age, whereas the ancient people may have possibly been copper, would have been a predominant blood type, or possibly something else. So who knows? Does that mean that their planet or the place that they came from, that's the operating system? And we use gold, right? We use gold in our computers and silver for components. This microphone has gold plated. So there's definitely something to it. Look at the pyramids, right? These ancient structures, of which now we're discovering more and more in South America, hidden in the jungle. Why geometry? Why geometry? Well, our body has a sacred human geometry. It's hidden within us. circle representing heaven energy. The triangle is the human, right? The three aspects of ourselves: spiritual, physical, emotional. And then we have, in some constructs, the square, the box we live in, the earth we live on, you know, the four sides of it, the four elements, you know. So we have the four seasons, and that's represented by the square. And I think this was all hidden language. We've maybe misperceived it, you know. If you're religious, we talk about the Bible. There's actually like 7 or 8 books written before the Bible that are pretty much variations on a theme. It's a modern interpretation of a theme. You know, this incredible human being that rose up to save the world and then died. It's like the sun rises in the sky and then dies in the evening, you know, the sun rising and falling. You know, it's all metaphors. I mean, that's only my not to decry religious belief, whatever you're into. I think it's important. It's important for connection and sense of love with your community. But
yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities in the Abrahamic religions. You know, there's a curious similarities there, and I think a lot of things that you said before were very interesting. You know, with the chakra science, etc. And I mean, yeah, you're right. The incredible technologies that they had in the past, you know, with the pyramids, and they used to have gold tips that could conduct electricity like an antenna.
Yeah.
So what were they using this exactly for? You know, I mean,
well, I think
like
that
5,000 years ago.
That's a definition of technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you talk to me 203 phones later and this amazing laptop that can do incredible things. But that's how we've defined our technology.
Exactly.
What technology did they have? And I think their technology was more aligned with what this planet actually is, which is a generator of energy.
Exactly, yes. I absolutely agree with you. And it's another thing with how people perceive evolution of technology. For example, they created the equivalent of a computer. I don't know what it's called. It's like 500 years ago. They created this box.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, they discovered it at the bottom of the sea, didn't they? It was like a computer.
Yeah, and it calculates to less than a minute accuracy to like moons and different sky objects, and people cannot create this with the tools that they had then.
Correct.
They can only create it with additional...
Here's my supposition, that we live in an environment where we have a small ruling class that builds itself on petroleum, steel, you know, technology as it is, and they build that, and then that channels most of our energy into that. And it's the rare people that appear outside, thinking outside the box.
It's not working.
Oh, he's gone. Are you there?
Hello?
You keep glitching in the matrix. It's because we're talking about very...
They found us.
Or 2, it's just been like every 10 seconds I hear you.
Up.
And I hate to interrupt this as well, but I actually have to go. I have my cousin's birthday. I'm trying to make it to. So I was wondering if it would be possible. Could we maybe wrap it up with like maybe a demonstration or something people could do at home, or even just an introduction, like a quick, I don't know, we follow along, or is there something maybe you want to show us, Anthony?
I can do, it's probably easy if I demonstrate something and then get Obi to kind of tell me what he feels.
I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure to talk to you. We might have to have you on a second time. I feel like, especially with that last conversation, I feel like there's a lot more we could go into.
Sure. Yeah, sure. My mind is crazy. Like even my students say, the amount of stuff that's in there is.
Welcome to the club. You're in the right place.
Wise.
What should we? Is there anywhere in particular you want people to kind of direct people to if they want to find out more about you?
You can invite. So I've launched the Chi Life Academy. I can send you the links, and I'm dropping a course there shortly. which is the China Universe Qigong, which is a system I learned in China for health and well-being. It's a lineage system, so it's directly from, I'm like Master Wang and then myself, so and it's a good introduction to a form, if you like, a way of moving using Qigong, but it's not the entirety of what I teach. But they can follow me on Instagram as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'll leave you in the faithful hands of Obi, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, enjoy your party.
Thank you so much. Take care, lads.
Nice.
You talked about, and you're totally right, we are relying on technology, we are relying on AI, and you were like saying, okay...
It's channeled because of a few people that are telling us how we need to...
No, not about this. But beforehand, you talked about, and you were, visibly, you could tell that you didn't want to admit it, but you were admitting, okay, we do need these things, but we still should remain human. But... And it is, I'm going in a roundabout way, I totally agree with you, because essentially we are human. So to remain, to become better humans does mean that we still have to, do the grounding, etc. Because if we just rely on AI or something, we will become something else. So to become, in inverted commas, superhuman means we still have to be better in grounding, etc. Because it's part of that process to become better.
Yeah. And it's scary because, I asked my son this, and I said to him, like, if you had an opportunity to hack and become like the program Cyberpunk, if you've ever watched Cyberpunk on Netflix, would you have an opportunity to make yourself stronger? He said, like, yeah. Let's go. Let's do it. But I think it's because they don't understand the consequences. And so for me, I feel sometimes we worry about our kids, but I think perhaps our kids will be a little bit more well equipped for the modern world than we are. But I think we shouldn't really worry too much. I think we are evolving. I think this neurodiversity that's going on is part of that transition to cope with technology. So that when, perhaps if we do merge with technology, we're just more well equipped. I'm just very much on the side of caution and to strengthen the vessel that we live in first so that you have better control of yourself if we do decide to upgrade our world. But I do think the technology that we're using now is very much liquid crystal. It's all based on, where we're at. Petroleum, metal, gold, all these things. But I think some of the ancients were using the earth itself as a technology. I have no evidence of that, but it feels like that. If you ever go to these places, they even say Newgrange in Ireland is still an approximation. They don't even know if that's actually what it looked like. My feeling was probably more pyramid than the design they've given it.
It's insane. Some of these things, like if you go up from the if you like stand in front of them, like, oh, that's nice statues. But then if you go up half a mile into the sky, they make very accurate depictions of things. Like some of those things, and it is mind blowing. Yeah. How were they able to do this? And people are always directly going to aliens, but because they cannot understand. Yes. They knew how to conduct electricity. They used water in ancient Rome. They had, on average, if you compare them to like current day Italy, on average they had better water quality thousands of years ago. Yeah. People can't wrap their mind around it, but that's because that was the technology they were at the top end compared to the rest of the world.
It was necessary. It was necessary because humans at that stage weren't automatically a commodity like we are now. So, one of the things that blew me away was they found a Neolithic bow and arrow here. So Neolithic is pre-Iron Age, I suppose, or pre-Bronze Age. And that bow and arrow, there's a guy that replicated it in the UK, and they hung a dead pig from a tree. And they took a medieval bow and arrow, so many thousands of years later, and they took the same distance, same aim, same bow marksman, and the Neolithic bow completely destroyed the pig, went right in. And yet the medieval bow that was used in warfare in the 1100s was not as good. And the theory was that back in Neolithic times, if you did not kill, you did not eat.
Yes.
Whereas in medieval times, you had access to farming, so you could just go out and grab your pig and slaughter it. So, and then also you're in battle, so it's mass production of weapons with very low quality control. So it's interesting that our concepts of technology are completely skewed. But I believe that we have an internal technology within us that we've just lost. Because what we've done is we've taken all this internal technology that we have and we've externalized it. So our mobile phone is a cheap and easy way to be telepathic with one another.
Fair enough.
You know, there's round towers all the way around Ireland, built by monks, supposedly for protection from Vikings. But I think they were on the top of that tower, meditating and communicating and experimenting with esoteric knowledge. I do believe that.
Have you heard of something? His surname is Greer, Doctor something Greer.
Is it Andrew Greer?
No. You should look him up seriously.
Yeah.
So he talked to a lot of people on with security clearances that no one has, and he was able to get them in front of Congress to tell their stories.
This is like the Disclosure Project.
Yeah. He's on the forefront of that, and he talked about a thing that he's doing now, GS5 or something, because there's different levels of clearances, and he's talking to different people about telepathic kind of things where he goes into meditating with people, and they can create almost like a telepathic kind of channel to other kind of worlds
entities or whatever.
So
interdimensional.
So something like that, and to me that is hard to believe. Although he's a very accomplished person, it is hard to believe. I from time to time I do listen to Joe Rogan, and there's one story I do believe, which is the one with Bob Lazar, which is actually the highest viewed one on his channel, 70 million or something.
Wow,
it's crazy. So this guy, he was at a site, G5 or something like that, which is close to Area 51, and he reverse engineered a craft that he, he's very accomplished, he's
a physicist.
As a child, he made a rocket cars and stuff. People came to him and said, by the way, why don't you go over here? And so he went there, and there were these crafts, and they asked him to reverse engineer it. And he, till this day, he did this in the 80s or something like that. And he talked about a material that wasn't on the table. He talked about this for years and years. People didn't believe it.
117, element 117.
116, I think.
Or something like that.
116. And he talked about this. He was one of the only people, one or two people who talked about this. Didn't believe him. And then people found it on Earth. He talked about the foregoer of the fingerprint sensor. He talked about this. They're like, that can't happen. Yeah. And then people realized, you can actually do this. He kept talking about all these technologies that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And people realized that, actually you can. So there's a lot of people that say, I was on a truck and saw flying. They're a little bit less to believe, but it's very, you have to be quite.
I want to put some context on that.
Sure.
So my father worked for British Aerospace, which were the contractors for building weapons, predominantly aircraft, but they also produced the Airbus 320, these planes. And he was there to spray. So originally he was operating fabrication machines, so making components for aircraft. As time went on, then he went into aircraft spraying. And a lot of my cousins actually still work for British Aerospace. One's a metallurgist, another person's in administrational, another person's in like a fire officer. So a lot of my family went into that. But I remember every 4 years they'd invite family and friends down to an air show. And it'd be an air show of both displaying, commercial, but predominantly military, which is exciting when you're a kid. You're like 11 years old. And the aircraft that I was fascinated with was the Tornado and the Harrier jump jet. But every time my dad came home, every quarter, he'd bring a magazine, and it was like the company magazine. This is what we're doing. Look at all the money we're making, the profit, and we're selling these aircraft to the Saudis and whatever. But at the bottom was their fleet of aircraft, so military and commercial, non-commercial. There was one blacked out, one aircraft completely blacked out. It was called the ACA, Agile Combat Aircraft. And I was like, oh, what's that? That's, in me, I mean, as a kid, I never, when my friends came around to my house, there was always Carl Sagan, UFO, unexplained. Like, I was absolutely into this as a kid. There was never like Roy the Rovers or action magazines. It was always sci-fi. So I looked at this and said, what's that? And he said, oh, we don't really know, but they're developing this aircraft. And eventually that developed into the European aircraft program, then the European fighter aircraft, and then it became known as what we call the Eurofighter or the Typhoon, which is what the British Aerospace use now. And that went into service in 96. But here's a true story. I was brought into a simulator, so a simulation of that aircraft for flying it. So the aircraft wasn't finished, it wasn't built. So they cobbled together pieces of other aircraft, and then they were trying to simulate how this aircraft would fly in a combat scenario. Now, the simulators back there were nothing like what we have now. It was literally a geodesic dome with a projector and a 3D model that would be projected, and a very basic, almost like Minecraft style landscape. And I was allowed to go in and sit in the simulator, but the thing that stood out for me, and I never forget it, was it had touch screen technology in 1984. And fast forward to 2000, I'm going to say, you'll correct me on this, was it the iPhone 3 or 3S was the first, swipe. It was like the iPod. It was a swipe screen telephone. Do you remember? Anyway.
Well, yeah, definitely decades later, for sure.
So you're talking, decades later. Yeah. And this thing was advertised. I remember my wife, who was then my girlfriend, we went to see Spider-Man 2 at the cinema with Tobey Maguire.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that it was Spider-Man.
Yeah, so this film, and in the middle, like to sponsor the film or part of the advertising was this iPhone, and you had Steve Jobs going,
Right.
And my wife was like, whoa, that's just mind-blowing. And I went, I've seen it before. So I think when we talk about Greer, this guy, Stephen Greer, Stephen Greer.
It might be, actually.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of this is preparing us.
Sure, yeah.
It could be a psyop, it could be to keep their enemies wondering. But I think, like, if the technology they're about to reveal is so incredibly far beyond anything, I think they need to prepare us, because I think our minds will just collapse. They can say this element can levitate you, transport you at 0 to 50,000 miles an hour in less than a second. We're going to be like, well, what the hell have we been doing for the last 50 years? Why haven't we been using this to save the planet, to fuel the planet, to reduce waste? That's what's going to happen. And I think there's a fear of that.
Yeah, so Stephen Greer is the guy with the telepathic thing. Mm-hmm. He is something I believe a little bit less. Mm-hmm. The one I believe what he said when he came on the Joe Rogan show is Bob Lazar. Mm-hmm. He, to this day, he's actually less of a believer than anyone. He doesn't even believe in aliens.
What do we really know?
Yes.
That's what this boils down to. Yeah. I mean, I had a friend who went to Kerala in southern India. His wife was training in Ayurvedic medicine, and they went and they stayed in a local village, and the locals said, oh, you need to go and visit these incredible caves. And I can't remember the name of them, but they're in Kerala. You probably can look them up. And he went there to visit them by himself. He did a little bit of a journey, climbed down into the caves. And all he could see on the walls of these caves were carved, and they were carved with a tool that was kind of constant flowing lines. So it was almost like you could describe it as kind of a Van Gogh painting with these swirly lines. But within it were these characters that were tall, radiating a halo, energy coming out of their hands. And he said the weirdest thing was there was the Dharma wheel, which is was there. The Christian cross was there. This kind of almost Star of David style thing was there. And when he went back to the village, he spoke to the locals, and they said, yeah, we don't know. It's been carbon dated at 40,000 years ago. And he says, well, if that's the case, that's older than any of the religious symbols that we've been using. And they were like, well, maybe those religious symbols are borrowed, you know. But what we know is these things were created, really amazing pieces of artwork by hand. If people to ask me, what's your personal belief? I've got to the point where it wouldn't surprise me if we are the aliens, if we were left here, we were abandoned, we were genetically created to do work, to build buildings, to create technology on behalf of some other being, which we call God. And then they were like, nah, we're done with you now, we're going back, you stay here, this is your home. You know, you were designed to live in this environment, to breathe this air. And that's why we constantly ask ourselves, why are we here? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of our being? It's because we feel that sense of abandonment. We feel like we are alone. Invite anyone to look at the work of Lloyd Pye, P-Y-E. He was examining the human face, skull, and the human foot. And he used to study humanoids, what do you call humanoids, or people that lived before man as we know it. And he noticed that to go from, say, an ape, so like the bonobo is supposed to be closest to humans, or the gorilla, to a human would take millions and millions and millions of years. I mean, like you're talking 80 million years to transgress. And yet in our current scientific reckoning, it was only like some 80,000 years to come down from the trees, to then walk on the savannah upright. We had to walk upright because the savannah was such high grass, so therefore we walked on our hind legs, makes sense, so we could see what we were hunting and protecting ourselves from. It's a really, really nice story. But towards the end, what I liked about his lectures was he started then down the route of using electron microscopes to look at the actual DNA sequences. And this was before we really understood DNA as we do now. But he noticed there was like a weld mark on the XY chromosomes, particularly of the male, like as if someone had cut off a branch, and another one as if it's been welded, almost like a plaster.
Okay.
And he never drew any conclusions. What I used, at the end of his lecture, used to say, why is that there and in no other creature? I leave that up to you to draw a conclusion. So the suggestion is that we are, and some of us are genetically modified to look a certain way. So for example, with your ancestry, it suits to be that way. You're from a particular genetic offspring branch because it's optimal to live in that environment. Like if, for example, if you're Oriental, you need the eyes that way because a lot of that space was like Mongolia, Siberia. You get snow blindness. So it made sense to have smaller ears, a wider nose, smaller features, and anyone with snow blindness has to look through glasses that are slits. So it made sense to have a different eye structure. So that tribe could be genetically created and placed here. This tribe would suit this. And then, of course, as we were set off, eventually we get curious. We're left alone on the planet. We then migrate. We then find our own version of Ryanair to get where we need to get to interbreed and intermingle. I mean, I'm not saying that's true, but you do wonder, like, how did we just suddenly arrive? It feels like we just suddenly, to say that we crawled out of the sea and spent 450 billion years evolving into this. Yeah, perhaps, but I feel like a bit of fairy dust was sprinkled on it to accelerate the process.
I think the way I sometimes tell my little cousins the way so I'll just say the way I say that, guys, the way you are being told fairy tales, right? Yeah. After you believe those fairy tales, your parents tell you when you get older, these are not real. Yeah. And then when you get even much, much older, you realize that a lot of those fairy tales are actually real. Yeah. And for example, with the pygmies, etc., in the last couple of decades, and they don't for some reason they don't update the history books or something. They found tribes of pygmies with pygmy elephants and pygmy horses. They lived like this, like just in the fairy tales. Yeah. They found a bunch of caves where massive reptiles were in, where there was a chemical, like thousands of cases, chemical imbalance that if you put in CO2, it would explode. Wow. Meaning those reptiles that were immune to those breathe out. Yeah. The CO2 went in there, exploded, so they were literally
dragons.
Yes. Yeah. They were just reptiles. They were breathing out. Yeah. And they found out. They saw in near California. I don't know where it was. In the west of America, they found people that were 13 foot tall. Wow. Like a bunch of them, just like a mass grave. 11 foot, 12 foot, 13 foot. These clear giants. They're just giants. Yeah. They took a rowboat from the Nordic and they rowed to frigging west and yeah. And of course, people were much shorter than this was like tens of thousands years ago. Of course, if you're like 5 foot and see someone that's 13 foot, that's a giant.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, you have pygmies, you have giants, you have dragons. Yeah. All the fairy tales are basically true. They found in Indonesia, that one's crazy. Well, everything else is also crazy. They found dead skin of a snake that was 100 foot long and was big enough to, without stretching its mouth, would be able to just swallow a motorbike. Yeah. What's the dune?
Yeah, like the word.
They found also skeletons, not like skeletons of some kind of elongated creature that was like a leviathan. It was in the desert. They found so many things. So all these stories that
do you remember when you were a child and you'd look at a map of the world or an old map in a book, right, and they always had a sailboat, and you'd always see a leviathan or some kind of creature attacking the boat, just to say don't go there, because you'd be thinking that doesn't exist, but now you're beginning to think I think what's being suppressed exactly.
Or there was a monster coming out of the sea and eating they're giant squids, and of course the giant squid now.
Well, we had more carbon dioxide back then than we do now. I mean, with this whole CO2 bullshit. I mean, if you have a lot of CO2, plants are gonna grow huge. Okay. So if you're gonna survive, you would eat more plants and get bigger. So we had, if we had dinosaurs that were absolutely taller than this house, this building we're in right now. And it made sense that they were that tall because the food they were eating was huge. And then as the CO2 lessened, plants didn't grow as big because they had to conserve their energy. I think it's natural. Is it Brett Weinstein talks about there's a second DNA strand, there's a secondary system we need to look at, which is called active selection. So instead of like Darwinism, which is survival of the fittest, there's actually nature itself is creating the selection. Okay. It's not like if you can live faster, harder, you're going to survive. Right. It's like nature's constantly changing and is actively almost helping to create the species to exist through the planet evolving. Do you understand? So like, the planet's thinking, maybe I'd like to have more whales. We see this now. The great white is migrating into the Mediterranean. Why is it going there? It's because the polar shift, maybe it can't navigate, maybe there's more food now in the Mediterranean, or maybe there's less food where it was. It's like literally as the planet's changing, the adaptation of the species changes, you know. So for an example, we talk about the Great Flood theory, you know, suddenly half the planet being wiped out by a flood. All those species that did exist, gone, suddenly just gone. And then now we're having to like push the restart button. We're discovering new species. I know, okay, we're losing millions of species, but we're discovering tens of thousands of species.
Yes. Every single time that James Cameron or other people find a way to get those submarines 1 meter down further, we find like 5 different things. Now, these are never really monsters, but we find every single time we find a new species. Some of them are massive. I don't know if you heard about that very robotic looking massive
spider crab, is it?
Yeah, it was massive. It looked like a machine. But it was, you know, every time, which is crazy.
So now we've discovered, I think some like 400 miles under the earth is an underground ocean.
Okay.
So this has only recently been discovered, that there is water underneath the sea. So there's a sea and we have a subsea.
Okay.
Like, what is that water doing there?
Yes, I heard about it. Yes.
And what is in that? Is there, you know, where there's water, there's life. You know?
Pacific Rim, here we come.
It's crazy. You know, so I mean, I believe that aliens exist on this planet, and it may be just right in front of us. You look at an octopus, like genetically, an octopus shares no genes that are that have any similarity to any other creature.
Okay.
They're so vastly genetically different.
Okay.
And I've actually swam with an octopus and interacted with them, and they're incredibly playful and incredibly kind and nurturing. Not what you would imagine, you know, a sea creature to be. And I had an extremely spiritual experience with one in Turkey, a little common, it's called a common octopus, but it resonated with the colour yellow, and it took hold of my hand and it pulled me, this tiny thing, probably the size of my shoe, and it pulled me along like as if I was nothing, using jet propeller, pulled me along, pulled me towards its lair, showed me its lair, went in, and just kept sort of, as if it was playing high five with me. I remember the dive master that was with me was like, just clapping his hands underwater and say, that's a one in a lifetime interaction. So what do we really know?
Yes, their entire, because again, this comes back around to us not knowing, not really appreciating intelligence in the various ways it evolves, because squid and the octopi have their brain structure is in the arms as well. So when they touch you, they feel it in all 5 senses, because it's literally, because people have to understand, when anything they touch, it's like they licked it, like they saw it, but they saw it in many more dimensions than we see. They sniffed it. It's because their brain. It's yes. It's a
Neuralink.
It's a completely different.
It's the real
sensation.
Neuralink.
Yes. It's a completely different sensation, and we just don't
appreciate it.
The older we get and the more information we get into us, we understand that we understand nothing.
That's it.
And I really love the additional conversation that we had. And looking forward to the
maybe part 2.
Qigong,
we'll try the Qigong. I'm glad it was free flowing, and I'm glad that we had the courage to talk about things that perhaps most people aren't prepared to go there. And
I get ready to get unfollowed.
I think that's the way. I mean, I used to hold back a lot and be very. I mean, living here in Ireland, as you know, sometimes you have to be cautious what you say to people. But I'm getting to the point where I really don't care what you think. You either like it or you don't. And
I love that we had, because I mean, we have so many different, last year I named that person religious nutritionist of hegemonic masculinity. Made it very fancy sounding. And he was a very, religious person. But I love that he was really like, he had a head between his shoulders, was willing to listen and learn, and also teach us, and we are learning, and I hope that we have him on this season again. His name is Patrick, and we might have him like in 2-3 episodes, but it was very controversial because he's very religious and very very traditional.
Right.
And I have very liberal friends. Jamie has very liberal friends, so some of them did not like what they were hearing, and then followed. But I think it is important to have conversations with people that say and think things that not everyone may agree with, because again, like
that's
I said,
the balance.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
There's truth here, there's truth there.
Yeah.
The balance is to pick from different sources, and I really appreciate the conversation we had, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Do the shake.
And this was Slim and Light. All right.
Flowing. Dragon's breath. Dragon flying. This is a fire element that brings up a lot of heat in the body, keep you warm. And then one of my favorites is the Jade flow for clearing the body. It looks like a martial art.